It's fantasy time.
Yeah, we're talking fantasy sports, not Dear Penthouse. But don't worry, winning your league is way better than porn.
This is Fantasy Hockey Time with Dean Millard.
Can you dig it?
Presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports.
Can you dig it?
Get in the game where you own the game.
Joe own the Chiefs. Owns.
Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Hockey Time, presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. You are watching this show on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. My name is Dean Millard, and I am here to help you win your league, or at least I can help you make it better with some rules, some suggestions, and a bunch of thoughts from our listeners and viewers as we wrap up another fantasy week and look ahead to the one that is in front of us. And we always like to start things off on this show with a question of the day.
This is a serious message. Peace and love. Peace and love.
So what we're going with today is the Dynasty League first defenseman you would be targeting. Let's say you're in a brand new Dynasty League. Who are you going for first? What defenseman would you be targeting in a brand new Dynasty League? Got a lot of suggestions from, not just people on Twitter, but people in the Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports world. Definitely some Cale Makar coming up a lot. Victor Hedman still did come up. Quinn Hughes, but a lot of Cale Makar. And I can't really disagree with that. I mean, the guy is looking like he's going to be all world. He just came out of college a couple years ago and just stepped into the playoffs. Looked so good. So if you want to chime in with your answer, please do. Hit me up on Twitter at Duck Millard, and we can chat back and forth about which defenseman. I also threw a question up on Twitter over the weekend. If you were redoing the 2016 draft, what would the top 5 look like? I think everybody would still have Auston Matthews. You would absolutely just have to be blinded by hate of the Leafs. And I can't stand the Leafs, but he's still the number one player from that draft. It's not even close. Matthew Tkachuk, I think I had number 2. Pierre-Luc Dubois, Patrick Laine. And I had Alex DeBrincat in there. You know, Alex DeBrincat, 76-point season, then a bit of a down season. Just outstanding right now, and a really, really good hockey player. So that's another question that I threw out on Twitter. You can chime in with me at Duck Millard and have your say on that one. And I'd like to say, first of all, big thanks to our title sponsor, Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, the most realistic, the highest stakes in fantasy sports out there, because it's not just hockey. I'm going to tell you about in a second, but the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League nearly mimics everything about the NHL, including a scouting program, a prize pool that is over $50K, as well as an expansion franchise that was recently auctioned off for $10,000 USD. The reason for that? They're not just fantasy hockey players. It's not just a fantasy hockey team. UFFS is on the Zilliqa blockchain, so they aren't just fantasy players you're drafting, they are NFTs, digital assets. Right now, there is the UFHL, the UFAHL, which covers off the American Hockey League, and the Ultimate Fantasy Golf Association was just announced, and another sport coming very soon. So get in the game where you own the game. Follow them on Twitter at UFF Sports and follow at UFS Network to find out more information on how you can get in the game where you do own the game. All right, here's what we have coming up for you. This is the lineup. We have our 3.5 stars, top 3, and an honorable mention. We'll give you 5 lineup decisions. Some of these will be no-brainers in some people's minds, but you just never know. And some of them won't just be about this week, but they'll be about kind of a fantasy forecast. We'll check in on the MASH 4077 unit, find out who's out of the lineup and for how long, if we know anyway. With some teams, it's kind of hard to know. We'll make some bold predictions. How bold can you get? We'll vote somebody on. I'm not voting anybody off, really, Fantasy Island this week, but I have a couple of players that I voted on in some trades and some waiver wires, and you can chime in with who you've picked up and who you think are good waiver wire predictions. What's bugging you? We'll deal with that on our Fantasy Beef and rules of fantasy engagement, how we can make your league better, because we all want to play in better leagues for sure. So, how do you get in touch with me?
You talking to me? You talking to me? You talking to me? Well, who the hell else are you talking? You talking to me? Well, I'm the only one here.
Hit me up on Twitter at Duck Millard. You can email me fantasyhockeytimepod@gmail.com. And give a follow on Twitter to the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFS Network. You can also email ufsn@uffsports.com and check out the website fantasyhockeytime.com. All right, without further ado, let's get things going.
Game on!
Face off.
All right, we start things off with our 3.5 stars of the week. And, you know, I'm giving Conor McDavid the honorable mention because he's going to be in this all the time. You know, he almost could be the first star. That 1 week where he had 0 points in that series against the Leafs. Yeah, he's probably not making the 3.5 stars, but he's just the best player in the game. You can't ignore it. You can't just decide that he doesn't get to be in there because he is too good. So Conor McDavid, though, gets the honorable mention. He could have been in the 3 stars, but he will be there so many times. So 4, 4, and 8, +5 if you have plus minus, unfortunately. 17 shots on goal. He also had a couple of game winners, which are important points / categories in some leagues. Tyson Berry, his teammate, getting star number 3 for me this week. Didn't have any goals, but he did have 6 helpers in 4 games. 3 of them on the power play. Again, bonus points for that. Also had 10 shots on net, +5 for the Oilers in the week in 4 games. Star number 2, Philip Grubauer, 3-0. He gave up just a single goal for the Avalanche. Man, he was a stud. He also had a shutout. 65 saves for a .985 save percentage, a .038 goals against average. He is right now the number 2 ranked goaltender on CBS in fantasy, behind only Andrei Vasilevsky of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Mika was the man. Mika Zibanejad, thanks to a 6-point night against the Flyers. Man, if we had the opposite of 3 stars, you could just fill it with Flyers from that game. -6, -6, -6. The goals against average of Carter Hart wasn't very good. It was ugly. But Zibanejad was the benefactor, as were many New York Rangers. He tied McDavid for the most points in the week with 8, also at 4 and 4. He had a shorty as well. Sometimes you get bonus points for that, and a game-winning goal. He also had 13 shots on goal. So pretty productive week for Mika Zibanejad and the New York Rangers, and that's why he is our first star of the week. All right, let's get to some lineup decisions now. And the Jack Campbell run is quite interesting right now with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He shut out the Flames on Saturday, and with Freddie Anderson out, it's they're saying day to day, but you know that could turn into a week, 10 days, who knows, depending on what is going on. They said the reason to go with Campbell was injury related with Anderson. And so you're probably going to get another week of Jack Campbell. We'll have some more on the Leafs in a second. He's on a team in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League that I'm in, which is the most, the deepest, most realistic league that there is. And so the Tornadoes in that league would have benefited from some nice points this week. But when you look at it, is Campbell worth dropping a guy like Jordan Binnington, who has had a really rough time as of late, just 2 wins in the last month? Is he worth doing that? I would say no, not likely for me. Binnington was certainly good on the weekend. They beat San Jose, and if Colton Parayko comes back soon, which it sounds like he could be, then the Blues, they get a lot better defensively. Jaden Schwartz is also out. There's a chance that Jack Campbell gets hot and takes the net away from Freddie Anderson. Short season, the Leafs will do anything to win in the playoffs. You go with the hot goaltender. I wouldn't bet on it. You could take a chance if you have some open room, if you have an open roster spot and you want to slide Jack Campbell in there, yeah, by all means, do that. I'm actually going to do that in my Yahoo League. I've got a goalie on an IR spot that is just, I have an open spot, so I, don't even have to drop that goalie, actually, now that I think about it. It's Ben Bishop. But we have, we're allowed to have 3 active goalies. So I'm gonna grab Jack Campbell as soon as I'm done recording this, just for the week that is right now. And depending on how your league is, that could be the difference of getting in the playoffs and out. But I don't know. Jack Campbell was at one point a highly touted goaltender, 11th overall by the Dallas Stars. Ride him if you have him, which is rare if you do. But be wary that Freddie Anderson is probably going to take the net back at some point. Decision number 2, buy low on Jack Eichel right now. If you're a rebuilding team, instead of asking for draft picks or prospects, and that team you're dealing with has Eichel and they're anywhere near a contender, offer some players that can help them this year. Now, if you're in some sort of a keeper league, they might not want to do that because Eichel is a keeper, but you might be able to pry him away from a team that's desperate, that, you have a couple of guys that will put them over the top. You never know. Obviously this season was a write-off, but going into this season, he had steadily improved. In the last 2 years was really good. The best thing is probably getting traded from Buffalo. It seems like it's a tire fire in Buffalo. So I would try to pry Jack Eichel off a team. If you're in a rebuilding mode, that could fast track it for sure. All right, 2-game weeks. That's another one to talk about. The Leafs, we just talked about Jack Campbell. The Kings and the Canucks all playing just twice this week. For daily players, the only way to play fantasy, in my opinion, this isn't a problem. But for weekly guys, it's tough. Now, obviously, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, they're still getting started. They're going to get their points, most likely. Thatcher Demko faces the Jets twice with a day off in between. The Sharks get the Kings, or the Kings get the Sharks twice, so Doughty, Kopitar, for sure would be in my lineup. But be wary of those 3 teams with only 2-game weeks. Speaking of the Kings, they have been royally dominant on the power play. If your league gives points for power play points, bonus points, or it's a category, you'll want to have some LA Kings on your team. I have Doughty in one league. It doesn't have power play points. Unfortunately, it has plus minus instead. Horrible. But Anze Kopitar is a stud on the power play this year. Second behind Conor McDavid in power play points. He's also, his teammate Dustin Brown, is third in power play goals in the league. So it's pretty impressive what the LA Kings are doing with, they don't have the top power play. I think it's like 6th in the league. It's interesting. The Carolina Hurricanes have the number 1 power play in the league, percentage-wise. They're tied for the most goals, but their top power play point producer is 7th best. So they certainly spread it around for sure. All right, the last thing, depending on how deep your league is, Jason Robertson could be an option. The 21-year-old is on the Stars' second line with Jason Dickinson and Denis Gurianov. In any kind of semi-deep league, he's probably gone. In my Yahoo league, he's gone. He's on a team's lineup. He's producing this year. But in Yahoo, he's owned by only 7% of teams. 16 points in 22 games, and he's had just 14 minutes of ice time per game. So the better he plays, the more ice time he could also get. And, who knows, possibly maybe he even works in some power play time at some point as well. You just never know. All right, let's now get to the injury report.
'Tis but a scratch. A scratch? Your arm's off. No, it isn't. Well, what's that then? I've heard worse. You've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look, just a flesh wound. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible!
That was the Knights seeking the Holy Grail from Monty Python, and one Golden Knight. We've been seeking him for a while. We want to see Alex Pietrangelo back on the ice. Unfortunately, he returned to Vegas last week and was placed on LTIR. But don't let that scare you away. It's cap reasons. The Golden Knights are they're in cap hell right now, so they have to do everything they can, and waiting a day to put them on LTIR actually created more cap space for them. So, man, oh man, walking a tightrope in Vegas, fittingly. So Petrangelo has an upper body injury. At least they mentioned that because before they weren't saying anything. Peter DeBoer said it's not long-term, but that he will be out the foreseeable future. That doesn't help fantasy owners heading into the home stretch trying to make the playoffs. 4 to 5 weeks left in most fantasy seasons. It's one of the reasons I went out and made a deal for a defenseman that I'll talk about a little bit later, because I just don't. I'm worried that this turns into something, or Petrangelo isn't as good as he was before, and he's pretty good in a lot of different categories. So unless you're in like a really deep playoff league like the UFHL that has 7-game playoff series right up to the Klein Cup final, then this could be really, really concerning for you if you're kind of on the fringes of things and you need Petrangelo to get back. Tuka Rask has also been out for quite a while. There was some talk of him returning on Saturday, but that didn't happen. In fact, the whole game didn't happen because of COVID. 4 Bruins, Jake DeBrusk, David Krejci, David Pastrnak, and Craig Smith were placed on the COVID list. Tuesday's game with the Islanders has also been postponed. Makes it an easy choice for teams with Rask as their starter. You go with your backup. He is skating with the team. When the facilities are open, he should be back soon, you'd hope. And then, the Boston Bruins have all kinds of things going on right now, but COVID has certainly thrown a wrench into things. We talk about teams with only 2 games. This cuts back the Bruins by 1 game for sure. John Gibson also on the IR. He's eligible to come off Monday night. So tough for weekly owners because they have to make a decision on this guy, although the Ducks are not very good. But he's top 9 in shots against, top 3 in shutouts. If you have goals against and save percentage, you're probably not winning those categories with John Gibson. But just a note for teams out there, he is on the IR, and a lot of goalies getting banged up. Darcy Kemper also injured, left last Monday's game with the Avs, a lower body injury. He is out week to week, which will have some fantasy GM scrambling to get a replacement for their starter, or like maybe in most cases their backup. But if you have Antti Ranta, you can run with him now. I had Antti Ranta in the minors for 7 years in one of my leagues. I finally had to drop him because I traded for Tuka Rask, who's now on the bench. Boy, I could use an Antti Ranta. Everybody's favorite Uncle Antti Ranta. Evgeni Malkin, the big Russian, is week to week with a lower body injury. He left last Tuesday's game with the Bruins, was riding a 12-game point streak. Jared McCann is the benefactor as he moves into that second line, and this could impact Kasperi Kapanen, who is trending up while playing with Malkin, and not just in a negative way because Malkin is gone, but in a weird positive way because Kasperi Kapanen now ends up getting a little power play time. So it's quite interesting to see how injuries affect some players, you would think, in a negative way, and sometimes they get the power play time that is missing. And Tyler Toffoli, day-to-day, missed Saturday's game with the Canucks, monitored to see if he is indeed healthy, as Monday night the Oilers are, so Monday night the Canadians are set to face the Edmonton Oilers. All right, we're going to get into some bold predictions when we return.
This is Fantasy Hockey Time with Dean Millard.
It's a rout. It's a blowout.
Fantasy Hockey Time is part of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, your one-stop fantasy sports shop. We are building something all fantasy fans will love, and we're looking for quality programming to join us. Reach out if you're interested in being part of the rotation, whether you have a daily, weekly, or even a monthly show. If it's about fantasy sports, we'd love to chat. Follow a couple of accounts, at UFF Sports, at UFH League, and at UFS Network on Twitter for more information on how you can own the game.
Hear me now and believe this later.
Prediction? Yes, prediction.
Pain.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
We want to pump you up.
All right, my bold prediction this week is Nashville Predators forward Filip Forsberg lights it up. I'm going 6 goals, 3 assists, and 4 of those points are going to be on the power play. He's also going to have 2 game-winning goals. They get the Blackhawks twice, and the Blackhawks have given up the 3rd most goals in the National Hockey League. So that's my bold prediction, is that Filip Forsberg, and a lot of teams are calling about Filip Forsberg as well. The deadline is getting closer, but my bold prediction is a 9-point week for Mr. Forsberg of the Nashville Predators.
Welcome to Fantasy Island.
All right, time to vote.
Wendell is cut. Rudy is cut. Janie, you're gone. Steven, I like your hustle.
Get him a uniform.
Congratulations. The rest of you made the team. Except you, and you.
All right, so Fantasy Island this week, I actually voted some players on and did, I guess, vote some players off through trade. I made a couple of moves. As I mentioned, I was a little bit worried about Alex Pietrangelo and the long-term status, so I wanted to get I wanted to improve my defense, but I wanted to have somebody that could step in and produce, and so I went out and got John Klingberg. I think the Dallas Stars defenseman is great. I'm not sure that the Dallas Stars are, certainly going to have a lot of gas down the stretch, but Klingberg, still a pretty young player. I gave up Vince Dunn to the Blues, Rasmus Ristolainen of the Sabres, and a first and a second round pick. And the reason I gave up so much is that I definitely want to win this league for sure. I went into a massive rebuild 2 years ago. I really want to show everybody that was questioning my rebuild that I can do it. And then if I lose, I'll just tear down and rebuild again. So not a big problem. And Klingberg also has another year on his deal after this. It's a dynasty. It's a contract league. So we signed up to 1 to 4 years. So I get him for another year. So it will benefit. And then I went out and got Brock Besser for 2 third-round picks. Now, I should point out I now have 0 picks in the first 3 rounds for the next 2 years. But I've got a stacked team. If I win it all, it's worth it. It doesn't matter. I will also have a chance to re-sign Brock Besser. I've got guys like Drew Doughty, Alex Pietrangelo, Brock Besser as candidates on 1-year deals that I can re-sign them. So those are the 2 guys that I added in trades. And I went and got Thomas Tatar on the waiver wire as well. Especially with Toffoli out, Tatar will get more opportunity as well. So that's what I did certainly this week when it came to Fantasy Island, voting most of the players on and obviously voting a couple of guys off in a few deals.
Back to the pond, rookie.
This is Fantasy Hockey Time with Dean Millard.
Dean Youngblood, 5 foot 10 inches, 160 pounds. He's 17 years old. An American kid from Stanton. Scored 92 goals this year so far for the Stanton Flyers.
Fantasy Hockey Time is presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. It is easily the most realistic fantasy platform around. The Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League mimics just about everything about the NHL, from a scouting program to actual 7-game playoff series. After a playoff draft where you pluck from the non-playoff fantasy franchises, and they aren't just players, they are NFTs, non-fungible tokens, digital assets on the Zilliqa blockchain that you can bid on. You can bid on in auction. That's how we do our draft. You can trade. You can build your team or your scouting platform. With UFFS, you own the game. So get in the game and follow at UFF Sports, at UFH League, and at UFS Network for more information.
Am I hot? Yeah, I'm hot.
It's some bull crap.
I'm your huckleberry.
Well, we're waiting.
That's a crock of crap.
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
All right, my fantasy beef is the loophole guy or girl. You know this fantasy player. They try to take advantage of every situation they can. And oftentimes it's just to the frustration of commissioners out there that they are just looking for problems. Now, sometimes there is good loophole guys and girls in that they're just pointing things out as opposed to taking advantage of something that somebody didn't think about. But most of the time, loophole guy or girl is very selfish and they're just doing it to gain an advantage. You know what? And sometimes loophole guy and girl gets caught and then they pay a price. In some leagues that have sort of those things set up. Certainly in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League, one of our teams got burned by LTIR, and it was made clear that that was on the owners of the teams to monitor that. And I don't know if it was a loophole because the player that they were using was supposedly injured, and it was just it's a loophole guy, and that's the unfortunate situation. Like I said, sometimes loophole guys and girls can help you by just pointing things out. Most of the time, they're just selfishly looking for some kind of an advantage. So it's tough. There's always people out there that are going to try to game the system in some way, and that's what loophole guy. Listen, if it's not against the rules, how do you hold it against them? But you make a rule because of that. Barry Bonds, It wasn't illegal in Major League Baseball that his head swelled 20 sizes and he hit the ball farther than anybody. But they closed that down and started cracking down, and, Major League Baseball just handled that horribly. But that's what loophole guy or gal does, is they force you to make decisions that you maybe didn't think about. Sometimes they're good. Most of the time, it's for selfish reasons. I talked about this with Craig Button on tracking the draft, not about loopholes in the NHL, but just about teams. And there's some GMs that are just strictly selfish about their team. They don't care about the betterment of the league. They just want the best for their team. Well, your owner is paying you for that, but everybody benefits for the betterment of the league. And it's selfishness. That's what loophole guy or gal ultimately is.
Smokey, this is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules.
I don't think it taints it.
What'd you talk about, mister?
All you have to do is follow 3 simple rules.
Okay, so in rules of fantasy engagement, a lot of times I give recommendations from leagues that I'm in or people that I hear from on social media that watch the show or listen to the show, and they reach out with different rules in their league. I would love to hear some unique rules in your league. Hit me up on Twitter at Duck Millard, or you can email me to this show at fantasyhockeytimepod@gmail.com. Let me know what some unique rules are for your league. But in this instance, I'm just giving a general rule that I live by in fantasy sports, and that's, as a buyer, get your stuff done before the deadlines. Sneak up. Sometimes you might have to overpay, but you're not going to get into a bidding war. Or sometimes it might feel like you're overpaying, but it prevents you from getting into a bidding war at the deadline and definitely overpaying. So I try to get all my stuff done. I've done that in my one hockey league. The other hockey league, I don't need to do a whole lot. I got a really good team. But in this particular league, I really wanted to beef up. I really want to win it this year. So I got all my stuff done. Now, as a seller, the rule is you wait as long as possible till the deadline. And it, certainly this isn't a hard and fast rule with every player, but in general, if you can do this. I'm in a situation in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League with Justin Schultz where I'm going to wait right until the last minute, and if I don't get the exact offer I'm happy with, I'm totally fine keeping him. He's got another year at a really affordable contract. He's been, he would be top 4 on at least number 5, 4 or 5 defensemen on a lot of teams in our league. So that's a guy who will hopefully bring in what I'm wanting, but if not, that's okay. You wait, you be patient. If you don't get the right offer, you don't trade them. Now, if you're losing that player, then don't be stubborn. Get something for nothing, even if you're getting lowballed. And if there's no way of you doing that, then take whatever you can get. Don't be stubborn. Don't be emotional. Don't not trade a guy and get value just because you don't like another GM. That's just silly. You have to think of this as a business if you want to succeed in fantasy sports. So there it is. That is rules of fantasy engagement. And that's going to wrap things up for us on the program this week. I want to remind you that you are watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. Along with this show, we have the UFFS podcast every second Sunday. Episode 19 just came out this past Sunday. It was awesome. Jesse Gill from the Brutes. Check it out. This show, as you're watching it, comes out Monday morning around 8 a.m. 2 Minute Tuesday in the afternoon. Tracking the Draft with Craig Button comes out Wednesday afternoon. And UFHL Now every Friday here on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. We take an in-depth dive into the UFHL. So that's where you can find great quality programming. And of course, Fantasy Hockey Time, as mentioned, is part of the UFSN. It is awesome. We're building a fantasy sports platform. We're building a fantasy sports network. We would love for you to be a part of it. Hit us up on Twitter at UFF Sports and get in the game where you own the game. This has been Fantasy Hockey Time, presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, helping you win your league and hopefully make it better. Have a great week in fantasy, everybody. We'll talk to you next Monday.